Welcome to the Sweet Science of Fighting podcast. Today we have Mirek. I'm not going to try to say your last name. I'm very sorry.
That's
I will butcher that
that's
completely.
fine.
But yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, perfect. So you've got an extensive background in the various sports you've worked with. I mean, you're currently working with Poland Rugby. You got the Polish Weightlifting Federation. How long have you been with the Polish Weightlifting Federation?
My second year now, so
Second year.
not,
Okay,
yeah,
nice. Um, so you got that, and then you've got a bunch of other stuff you've done in the past as well. Do you want to maybe give a brief background about yourself, and then we'll dive straight into some of your research and case studies.
perfect. So well, I've been doing strength and conditioning as my profession for the past 13 years now. Actually, I'm live in Poland now. I was born in Poland, but I spent some of my time in the United States. I went to high school in New Jersey. Then I went to a few different colleges because I bounced around a little bit because I played basketball. So I went to junior college first, then I went to like a Division II school. Then I transferred to a different D2 school. Then I had like a few year playing career in Poland. And then after I finished pretty much with basketball, because my dream was to make it pro, but I never made it to the NBA. I mean, God didn't bless me with much height. I was 5'10" with good shoes. So after I figured out that I won't really make it any and make it to the NBA or make any great money with playing basketball, I kind of went back to my passion that I had for a while, which was strength and conditioning. So I contacted my first strength coach that I had at junior college, which is Mercer County College in Trenton, and his name is John Kalinowski, and he pretty much walked me through all the steps that I need to do and becoming a strength coach, obviously doing the CSCS and all that stuff and trying to get the GA position. So that's exactly what I did. I actually got into Temple University in Philadelphia and I got a GA position. I was there for 2 years coaching, and we actually were lucky because we had many sports and not many coaches. So it was just like a head strength coach and two GAs with 24 sports. So my
Oh my
yeah,
gosh!
yeah. So both years, for first year I coached 3 teams. Second year I had like more than 10 teams coaching as a GA, so which was great experience for me. From there I went into a director position at the University of Redlands for strength and conditioning, which also we had like more than 20 sports. It was a Division III school, but we had football obviously, and we had 20 plus sports besides that, and it was just me and the GA as well. So another great another great experience for me. And after that I actually went back to Poland and I opened up a business here, strength and conditioning, which is strength and conditioning education center. So we have a facility here in Gdynia, Poland, where we train athletes, we educate coaches, we educate athletes obviously how to train, and that's like my main thing. But on top of that, I work with individually with professional athletes, as well as teams. Like you mentioned, I work with Poland Rugby, I work with Poland Weightlifting, and I usually do some individual professional athletes on the side as well.
Yeah, that's a lot on your plate, and we should also name drop. I'm probably going to butcher her name too, but Joanna Jędrzejczyk, when you used to train
Yeah.
her back, so and we'll touch on that as well. So for the people listening as well, uh, or at least a lot of the fighters listening and stuff, there's a lot to go on there. But I wanted to start with some of your research that you published recently. Um, One that was interesting to me, just because I've heard and read about brain derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF for short, and it's probably something that's talked about or cited a lot within like the nootropic and brain supplement kind of area, but I've never seen it in the strength training area. And I haven't actually read too much about BDNF itself. So do you want to maybe just run through kind of what BDNF is and kind of why it might be important or not important? And then maybe just someone's idea of how strength training affects that.
Yeah, well, so brain derived, it's a brain derived protein of the nerve growth family. So it affects the brain, obviously. It's very critical for cognitive performance, but also affects brain plasticity in the long term. So like if you want to say like one sentence what it does, so it pretty much controls the survival and maintenance of nerve cells, and this is the most important thing. So it promotes nerve survival, neuroplasticity, nerve growth. It has impact on learning and memory. Controls body weight, blood glucose, decreases food intake. There's so many benefits that it promotes in your body, and it was research pretty much how strength training affects BDNF is not that common. So I did it was a review article that I did. So I found 10 studies when they measured BDNF plasma in blood based on strength training. And I did a review article about a year and a half ago about that. Um, so based on what I found, if you stick to the training parameters, so what I was looking for studies that had um, defined training parameters. I wanted to see how many reps, how many sets, the percentage of intensity, obviously, and rest periods, which was not that common in research. Like there's only few studies that actually list rest periods, which is weird because that changes the whole picture of how the training affects your body and BDNF and everything. So if you rest 30 seconds or you rest 5 minutes, it's a completely different picture of how the strength training affects of what you're doing or what you're trying to achieve. So I was looking for set rest periods, and I was also looking for tempo, but none of the studies use tempo training. Like you use the four letter tempo, like a 40x0 tempo or 3010 tempo. So like a 3 second eccentric, 0 second at the bottom, 1 second up, and 0 second up top. But there's no studies listing tempo. So I was at least looking for sets and reps, intensity, and rest periods. So based on what I found, if you stick to get the positive increase in BDNF, if you go above 70% of intensity, you use specific rest periods, so they can't be too short and they can't be too long. So obviously, if you work at rest periods should always be based on intensity. So the lower the intensity, obviously the rest periods could be shorter. The higher the intensity, the rest periods obviously have to be longer because it affects the nervous system more and less the muscular system. So obviously, if you do a 70% intensity, you should use about 90 to 120 maybe seconds rest periods and no more than that. But also you shouldn't be using 15 seconds rest periods because that's not enough. So if you say you used 70% of 1 RM but you used 15 seconds rest periods, that can't be 70% of 1 RM. Something was wrong there. So there were some studies that were like kind of mixed up with the rest periods. Like you could just tell it was impossible to keep that rest period at that intensity. Like there's no way you can rest. You could do 5 sets at 85% with 60 seconds rest in between. Like that's not achievable. If anyone is ever strength trained before like this, it's not possible to do that. Maybe one set or maybe 2 sets, like you do like, I don't know, 5 reps at 85%, you rest 60 seconds, maybe you get another set in, but not 5 sets. So I was looking for good studies, obviously. So specific rest periods, intensity, and I found that full body multi joint training above 70% with specific rest periods work best, and they seem to increase BDNF, the brain derived protein of the nerve growth family, the most. But obviously, there's more studies that need to be done. I'm actually doing my PhD now, and I'm looking at BDNF as well. On top of increased strength, I'm comparing two different periodization models and its effect on strength, hypertrophy, and cognitive function, including BDNF protein. So I want to see what I found because I actually kept everyone above 70% for the 12 weeks, and I had a pretty good group of over 40 participants.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I want to see how it affects BDNF, first of all, and second of all, which periodization style affects it better if I can distinguish between the two. So we'll see what I come up with.
Interesting. Okay, so this increase in BDNF, uh, it's interesting because I think you're probably covering this in your new research as well. Obviously, you have acute and chronic, uh,
Yeah,
I guess, responses to this, right? So
exactly.
typically, you see, people talk about increasing testosterone from weight training, and that's beneficial. But that's an acute increase in testosterone. Over the long term, it doesn't really mean anything in terms of gains for strength and hypertrophy. For BDNF, is that potentially fall into the same category where there's acute increases in BDNF from strength training may not mean anything in the long term, or is that something you're still trying to figure out?
Yes, I mean the studies are mixed. There are some studies that would measure BDNF straight after training, like they would do straight after, 20 minutes after, and like a 60-minute after. But they didn't measure it long term. But there are other studies that didn't do straight after training, but they measured it like before the start of the program, which is I did. What I did, I measured BDNF before the start of the 12-week strength program, and I'll measure it at the end of the 12-week strength training program. So I will measure like a chronic increase in BDNF if that's possible. So, but there's definitely an acute increase in BDNF after strength training, and it seems to be after heavy multi-joint strength training, especially lower body training. And but it's definitely true and it's happening, but we don't know if it stays elevated for like a longer period of time. So that's what I'm hoping to find out with my research, at least to some
Mm.
extent.
Does that mean that if you did strength training before a maybe cognitive demanding task, that if an increase in BDNF might help you with that task afterwards? Is that kind of the outcome you're kind of thinking of and looking at?
Yeah, so what I actually also did a cognitive test, which is a Stroop test. It's one of the cognitive tests that have been used in research for a while. So I will see if it actually translated. If somebody has an increase in BDNF and the cognitive test also is better, along with their strength increase, then I have all the boxes pretty much checked on what I wanted to achieve. But I could also get a result of increased BDNF, but the cognitive test stays the same or gets worse. So
Mm.
we'll see. I'm hoping to get that going soon and start writing that and analyzing the results. So it should be done this year. So we'll see.
Perfect. We'll bring you back on when they get published too, so we can run through those results. And I know you published one. You weren't the lead author on this one, but it would still be interesting to go through. I think this one was more recent. The increased intake of EPA and DHA. So for people listening, fish oil would be a very simple example that contains EPA and DHA. So I think there was actually a recent paper that was published around increased fish oil, or at least EPA and DHA, for reducing muscle soreness after eccentric exercise. Do you want to maybe just run through some of your findings in here, maybe some of the practical advice that you would give to maybe an athlete or combat athlete or whoever around EPA and DHA?
Yeah. So I mean, I was always fascinated with omega threes. Obviously, I'm a big fan of Charles Poliquin, and he always used omega threes with his athletes. But I was just surprised why, because Australian Institute of Sport has the supplement classification list, which is A list, B, C, and D. I don't know if you're familiar with that. So A supplements are like pretty much proven, tested that they work. Like creatine would be like a supplement, or beta alanine would be a supplement, but omega 3s are in a B group, which is proven but not entirely proven that they work. So our goal was, or one of my colleagues asked me to help, because I'm a co-author on this, to help put together like a review, like again a review article on omega 3s or EPA DHA, and how it can help athletes and what benefits it has. And hopefully, we actually did that. We submitted a request to Australian Institute of Sport to move omega threes from B group to A group. So that's currently being analyzed, and yeah, so hopefully they'll move that to A. And but because research is almost, I mean, for me it's pretty clear, because we have research saying that it improves, like you said, it reduces soreness after strength training, It enhances resistant training-induced adaptations. It improves cycling and running economy. So that's like training adaptations. But we also have the brain functions adaptations, which is improve cognitive functions, improve mood, reduction in fatigue. So that's been proven as well. And what's important for contact sports athletes, so for me it would be rugby, for you would be we more like American football, like MMA. I work with MMA too, so for them too. But it's actually prevention of it prevents brain injuries, and it can help brain recover after injuries. So it supports recovery periods, and it shortens the recovery periods after brain injuries or any like head injuries, so concussions and things like that. So it also actually helps you maintain muscle mass after injury. So if when you get injured, athletes that would supplement with omega-3s lost less muscle mass than those that didn't supplement with omega-3s. So for me, I mean, there's a bunch of research. There's a lot of done on athletes. Hopefully more to come. But as far as doses go, like we don't even need that much, because based on the research we analyzed in the review article, it was between 2 and 4 grams of omega-3s. So that's not a lot. And we also, I mean, obviously for brain function benefits, you need more DHA than EPA,
Okay.
because brain is more DHA. So if you need any brain help, you would take more DHA based omega-3s. So that's the only thing I would add.
Interesting. Okay. Does the dose change based on body weight, or is it just 2 to 4 grams and that's kind of across the board?
I didn't see it based on body weight. It's 2 to 4 grams across the board. Usually in studies, the studies that we analyzed, not many had body weight of their subjects that they tested, which is a good question. And I would say if you do a study on omega-3s, you probably should pick similar subjects and not somebody weighing 120K and another person weighing 50K and he's taking 2 grams and she's taking 2 grams. So that's, but usually in studies, like if it's a good study, they will tell you to pick subjects that are similar in experience, similar in body weight, especially if it comes to studies that are like nutrition studies or supplement studies. They would want people that are similar in weight, in age, and things like that. So obviously the effects could be more clear, shall I say.
I hope you're enjoying the chat so far. Before we get back to that, I just want to let you know that Sweet Science of Fighting is more than just a podcast. We have a full training app with strength conditioning programs for strikers, grapplers, and MMA athletes, so you don't have to think about what you're doing and you're getting access to the latest scientific methods to improve combat sports performance. We have programs specifically for judo, for jiu-jitsu, for wrestling, MMA, boxing, Muay Thai is coming soon. All these things are going to be in the training app. We also have a private community where some of the coaches that have been on the podcast are in there to help you with any training questions and any performance questions you have. For example, Andrew Usher and Casper DeWitt. We also have some online courses within the training app. They cover strength, conditioning, mental skills, and weight cutting. And finally, we now have Ryan Villalobos in the community, a second degree jiu-jitsu black belt, who is there to break down any of your grappling matches that you want seen to by a second eye. He's currently breaking down videos on a separate Sweet Science of Fighting YouTube channel, and he will break down your video within the community. So if you have a match or a roll that you just recorded, you can upload that in there and Ryan will break that down for you. So what are you waiting for? Jump down in the description. You can check out the Sweet Science of Fighting Underground. Otherwise, enjoy the podcast. And I want to take this down the road of MMA strength conditioning as well, because you've been in that world. Joanna Jędrzejczyk was one of your fighters that you trained for a while, I think it was. So I don't want to give you a very general question because it might be hard to kind of figure out where to go. So we'll kind of make it more like a case study. So when you first started working together, let's start with how did you decide what needed to be trained and developed physically for her specifically, just so we can get an idea of kind of like your philosophy around training and things like that.
I mean, I like what you said already, because you said for her specifically and not for MMA specifically. And I think I used to think when I was first got into strength and conditioning that you need to design MMA specific programs or rugby specific programs, or American football specific programs, which is okay to some extent. But I always look at, and I always tell the people I'm coaching or training, that I'm not training an MMA fighter. I'm training an athlete that trains MMA or performs MMA. So I'm looking at an athlete first, and I'm trying to make that athlete better regardless of the sport. Because each athlete will have different needs and different problems that need to be addressed. So I can't just take Joanna Jędrzejczyk and look at MMA demands and just train her for MMA demands. Obviously, I will need to do that. But first of all, when I work with any athlete, I just look at them and see what problems they have. So I assess their range of motion, level of strength, level of conditioning. I look at structural balance. I look at previous injuries. I look at training history, training age, specific needs that they will have, or they'll tell me like they need. I could look at the speed strength. I could look at the reactive strength, the starting strength, and see where the deficits are. So there's many different things that need to be addressed before I even get into the sport itself, obviously. So when you look at MMA, obviously you look at the five, you look at your 3 or 5 rounds of action with 1 minute rest in between. You have the stand up fighting, you have the ground fighting, you have different type of strength that need to be addressed. So maybe with the stand up, it's more like a reactive strength. When with the ground, you need like more starting strength and things like that. So that could be addressed later. But before you address that, you need to address the specific needs of athletes, and in this case it was Joanna Jędrzejczyk. So what I did when I first started working with her, so I did a structural balance assessment. So I did max strength, I did um, rotary cuff, I did a trap 3 test, I did chin ups, I did like lower back test, hamstrings. I just did like specific muscle parts or body parts testing to see where the weaknesses are, on top of her working around her injuries. I actually had pleasure of working that her physiotherapist is my friend, and that's how I started working with her. So we actually was like a three of us. We were like a
Oh,
team. So
nice.
it was a strength coach, physical therapist, and it was her. So I had all her previous injury history report, or any problems that we have that she had, or anything. Because athletes, like, it doesn't have to be an injury. It could be like, after training, I feel my shoulder, like my shoulder is sore, my right shoulder. Like, I don't know why, there's nothing wrong with it. So it's not an injury, really. It's like an overuse thing. It could be tendonitis. It could be something developing down the line. It could be structural imbalance that you have to check for. So I pretty much had everything from him. And all three of us, or two of us, worked together to get her better. So I was trying to make her a better athlete, first of all. And for me, my philosophy is a stronger athlete is a better athlete. So I was trying to increase her strength. And with her being a female MMA athlete, usually they're not that strong. So I was trying to increase strength first, because I knew if she was stronger, she would be better, because she was very fast. She was very reactive. She was very dynamic. She could move. She was light on her feet, but she was not that strong. So I was trying to get her stronger, which I think helped her later on, especially in the fight, the first fight with Wei Li, which is one of the best fights ever. And obviously, Wei Li is really, really strong, like probably one of the strongest female strawweights ever, if not the strongest. And she went 5 rounds with her. Never didn't get knocked out. Obviously, she was beat up, but that's when I was, after that fight, I was like, okay, we lost, but I in my mind, I won. She didn't get hurt, she didn't get knocked out, she felt good. She went 5 rounds with no really she didn't really get tired that much. You couldn't tell a big difference between round 1 and round 5. And that's what I always wanted to achieve in any sport, if it's MMA or rugby, Like anyone can go for 1 or 2 rounds, but can you go 5 rounds at the same speed? Like in rugby, anyone can go for 20 minutes, 40, maybe 60, but can you go for 80? Like, and with Poland rugby now, like I'm trying to go for 80. And I think that's the difference with us this year. Like we actually, like, I don't know, you probably, I'm not saying that you saw the game. You probably didn't see the game against Romania.
No.
I don't blame you. But the last, like, so Romania scored the last try in the 33rd minute. So for 50 minutes, they didn't score a try. And we scored our try in like a 78th minute. Like we played to the end, and our best rugby is always like the last 20 minutes. So I'm always trying to, with her and with all the other MMA athletes and other sports, I always tell them that everyone's going to get eventually tired. Like we can't get tired. And I think if you overall stronger, you get tired less. Obviously you need conditioning, you need other things, but if you're stronger, the game or MMA fight is not going to take that much from you. You're not going to get that tired if you're strong. If you're really weak, then each action, each strike, each ground game, each thing that's happening is going to take so much energy out of you. By the time the fifth round comes around, you're pretty much barely standing up, and the punches you throw in are not explosive. They can't really do any damage. So that's my take on it.
I'm going to come back to the conditioning part too, but it sounds like that the initial assessment it sounds very Poliquin inspired. Is that where a lot of, I guess, your initial philosophy came from?
Yeah, I think I always say like I'm the mix between Charles Poliquin and Louis Simmons. So
Okay.
I'm the mix between those two. So I say 80% is inspired by them. Obviously 20% is my own spin and other coaches that inspired me, but I really like what Charles Poliquin did. I really like what Louis Simmons did with dynamic method and max effort and the reverse hyper and the posterior chain and the conditioning part with sleds. I really like what Charles Poliquin did with the parameters, the variation of sets and reps and tempos and different wave sets and cluster sets and slow down eccentrics and different poses and just being really simple with things and structural balance. So I mix all that together, pretty much those two systems and those two philosophies with my own spin on it. But I think those two would be the coaches that inspired me the most.
No, so how have you adapted? I guess the Westside conjugate system, and maybe we can talk about how Poliquin's kind of come into that too. How have you adapted those systems into your philosophy around training athletes? So let's just take, for example, Joanna's maybe just like a typical training week and maybe a typical training day. How a week would look and set up based on those, or based on your philosophy there.
So what I did is pretty much out of camp, if you can say, I used Poliquin, and in camp I used Louis Simmons. So that's what I did. So out of camp, I focused on slowed eccentrics, on hypertrophy, strength, movement, full range of motion, structural balance, and things like that. So I focused
Mhm.
on those things. When we got in camp, which was like 10 weeks away, for example, just depending on the fight, it could be 12, it could be 8. Let's just say it was 10 to average the camp time. So that's when I jumped into like a Louis Simmons philosophy. So with MMA athletes, I knew a couple things are for sure. I knew that the strength that they need to generate in fight has to be repetitive. So it has to be repeated throughout the round and from round to round. So they can't get tired pretty much punching, kicking and doing wrestling and jiu-jitsu and ground game and everything. So what I did is I used high sets, low reps, and I used accommodating resistance. So I wanted to speed up the eccentric. I wanted to even out the strength curve at the top. I wanted to use many sets because that would require repetitive strength, right? So I used like 12 sets of 3 reps, and I wanted to use short rests because obviously in between different combination of throwing punches and kicking and so on, you have short rest. Obviously you can't specify the rest because it could be all over the place, and you don't want to be too specific because you can't be. The only thing specific is going to be the fight itself. But I knew I wanted to have many sets, small amount of reps, and short rest periods, and fast tempo. So I did, for example, first week, like 10 weeks away, I did 12 sets of 3, like a squat with chains, with 60 seconds rest in between at a 20x0 tempo. So it's a faster eccentric, not as fast as, because I wanted to increase the eccentric speed as we get closer to the fight. So the closer we get to the first week, the fight week, the faster the eccentric is going to be. And then the movement itself is going to be faster, and the time under tension is going to be shorter. So if I do 3 reps 10 weeks away at a 20x0 tempo, that's going to be about 6, maybe 7, 8 seconds of time under tension. And a fight week or 2 weeks away from the fight, I want to do like a 10x0 tempo, or even sometimes I will write 00x0 tempo. So pretty much drop, bounce back up, drop again, bounce back up, drop, bounce back up. So pretty much it should take you about 3 seconds to perform a rep. The time under tension to perform 3 reps. I would structure the 10 weeks up till the fight by starting with a high amount of sets, so 12, and then I would just go down in sets. I would do 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, down to about 3 sets when we get closer to the fight. But the reps would stay the same, so the volume will go down anyway. So if I did 12 sets of 3, that's 36 reps. By the time we hit in second week, I'll do 3 sets of 3, which is only 9 reps. Okay. And the weight would fluctuate, obviously, based on the weeks. I would usually start with about 50 to 55% of weight on the bar, and about 25 to 30% of accommodated resistance from chains or bands. I would do 2 weeks of chains, 2 weeks of bands, 2 weeks of chains, 2 weeks of bands. And then at the end, I will decide what's happening based on what I see. So if I need more strength, I would probably maybe use chains, or maybe strip the chains and maybe do like a 1 day or 2 days of like a strength nervous system training. If I need more speed, maybe I use bands again. So it all depends how we feel. So I wouldn't plan those last 2 to 3 weeks. I would leave that open based on what I see and make the decision when I get there. So I would drop the sets to about 3. The reps will stay the same. The weight would stay pretty much constant. It will be about, from adding the chains and bands, would be between 75 and 85%. So it would be like a strength speed type of intensity. But it'll also decrease the rest periods. So I will go from 60 and I'll pretty much decrease 5 seconds each week or 10 seconds each week until I get to about 25, 30 seconds in between the sets. So I'll do maybe 3 sets of 3 with 20 seconds rest at 85%, like 2 weeks before the fight. So I did that initially, but then I found out her last few fights, I was kind of losing strength in those 10 weeks because I didn't do anything above 85%. So what I did is, when I had 10 weeks, I did 2 weeks of chains, 2 weeks of bands, and I did 1 week when I did like a descending set of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I was trying to get a max rep, so 100% intensity on that one. I wouldn't tell her because she would be scared of maxing out a month before the fight. So I would just tell, all right, do 5 for first set. All right, it was easy. All right, add some weight, do 4. All right, it was easy. Let's add. I'll do 3 now. Do 1. Fine. And when we got to 1, so I would max her out without her knowing we just maxed out. And based on that 1 RM, I could structure the next 4 weeks percentage wise. It was more accurate than it was before, because the last if the last 1 RM I did was 12 weeks ago, and then in week 2 before the fight, that's 10 weeks spread. Plus she's losing weight now because she's has to make weight, so her strength is going down. So the percentage could be too high at the end based on what you used before. So that 5 weeks before the fight, I could like kind of max her out, and based on that, I could use the correct percentages for chains and bands for the last 4 weeks of the fight. And I think that was a better approach that I found, because it gave me that 1 week when I could do like a nervous system strength building week. Plus it gave me the correct percentages for the last 4 weeks for bands and chains. And obviously that was for A and B series. So I would do like a squat, bench, and like a deadlift or front squat, and like an overhead press or an incline press. And obviously I would do C series, D series. So obviously neck, single leg stuff, chins, rows, isometrics, overcoming isometrics, and things like that. So plyometrics, so I mix all that up. But the main Louis Simmons approach was the dynamic method that I've used in camp with her.
Gotcha. So within the week, then it'll be two to three sessions, maybe, and then they were all full body sessions.
Yeah, we usually do 2 sessions. So we found out that 2 sessions work best for her. So it was both full body. Obviously, when you do 2 sessions, you got to do full body, because if you do upper body and then lower body, the time between the one upper body and the next upper body is 7 days, which is too long. So you got to do full body both days, pretty much 2 times a week. So I would pick a lower body lift, which would be like a squat with chains, an upper body lift, let's say, was a flat bench press, and the next day I would pick lower body lift again, so it would be like a deadlift, sumo or conventional, and like an overhead press on incline press, and then I would just go on with the accessories, lower upper until I finish up.
Gotcha. And then you mentioned of the overcoming isometrics and the plyometrics and things. Were they coming later in the program too, or were they before the main lifts?
Yeah, if I do plyos or Olympic lifts, I would do it before. So always, if you do that, obviously the hierarchy of lifts, you have to start with the fastest lift first. So plyometrics and Olympic lifts would be faster than squats, even with chains and bands, which are pretty fast. So you start with those first to warm up, kind of, which was good. We always did some kind of jump into warm up or throws. So either jump and throw or jump and throw together in like a superset fashion for the warm up before we got into the A series, which would be a squat, deadlift, press, bench press, whatever, with bands or chains. And then after that, it would be isos, single leg stuff, neck, core, and things like that. So more like isometrics and single legs, single limb stuff, and then accessories for the core, for the neck, and things like that.
Perfect. And then regarding, before I move on to the conditioning as well, regarding the strength training exercises. So obviously you mentioned Westside's a big influence on your training philosophy, and obviously the squat, bench, deadlift, those lifts being in there definitely, I guess you say, coincides with that. Are you ever thinking about, I guess you, quote unquote, specificity or transfer to MMA, or maybe exercises that are seen or maybe deemed more quote unquote specific? Or are you just like, okay, we're just going to get strong in these basic lifts and that's all that matters?
I was always intrigued by Louis trying all that stuff, because it kind of didn't go hand to hand with what Poliquin used to always said. Like Poliquin would say, you shouldn't be specific. Strength training is not specific, and it shouldn't be. And Louis would do specific really movements, like adding weight to specific sporting movements, like punching with weight and things like that. Like, I'm not a big fan of that. I think you shouldn't add weight to specific athletic movements, because those movements are specifically designed to used by that athlete, either in a cage or rugby or whatever, and they're very specific. So it's a very short margin between hitting somebody in the nose and not hitting somebody in the nose. It could be this much. So I don't want to mess up a movement pattern by punching with weight or punching with band and things like that, because obviously there's things that can happen. You can extend the elbow too far, you can not finish up the punch and things like that. I think you teaching your brain the incorrect sequence of firing and incorrect coordination motor patterns when you do that. So I'm more into like a traditional strength training, weightlifting, and obviously you can, in my opinion, you can do anything you want to do with the athlete based on just manipulating the training parameters. So sets, reps, tempo, rest periods, picking the correct speed of exercises. So plyometrics, weightlifting, accommodating resistance, correct order of those exercises, how you put them into plan, obviously the intensity that you're working in. So there's so many things you can do before you can copy the movements from the sport into the weight room. Like, if you want to, the only thing specific about the sport is the sport itself. So if you want to be specific, like, you should just, like, what if, like, I always laugh at those specific coaches that say you should be specific in the weight room. Like, If you want to be specific, just put strap weights to your ankles and strap weights to your arms, and just play your sport with that. Like if that was the best case scenario, if that was the best approach, then that would be, it would be easy. You just, I don't know, you just run with a barbell. Like if you're a track athlete, you just put a barbell on your back and just freaking run with it. Like, and that would give you results, but it doesn't. It actually overloads the same movement patterns. It creates more problems because obviously athletes will have problems. Like Joanna would have rounded shoulders. Like she would have like a really rounded thoracic spine, which give her pain in her shoulders. So like if I, example, gave her dumbbells and she would punch with those, it would just make those problems worse. So I wouldn't want to do that. Like I would try to work the opposite muscles, the antagonist muscles, trying to keep the structural balance. Obviously, she's not in pain, because if she's in pain and I'm adding to her pain, I'm not increasing performance, obviously. I don't think you should really do that, because the sport itself is so damaging to the athlete. If you add weight to those movements, you could do more damage than good.
Yeah, no, for sure. And what this is a non-MMA question, but I know Westside, they went down the rabbit hole of adding bands for Olympic, specifically for Olympic weightlifting performance. I want to know your take on that, because I know obviously you're influenced by Westside, so I want to see if that's something that you also agree with, don't agree with, or whatever your thoughts are on it.
I kind of like that. I like
Yeah,
it for a couple of reasons. I think it could be helpful. I mean, maybe not for a snatch, because the range of motion and
yeah,
the specificity of movement is so specific, and you have to be so good at that movement. Like the band could actually mess up the movement pattern. But with the clean, which is more like a muscle, more like a strength lift than a snatch, which is like a fast explosive lift, it could help, I think, adding bands for several reasons. So bands will help you obviously triple extend more. So for athletes, I don't know about weightlifters, but like for athletes, I actually did ask the head weightlifting coach for Poland if he ever saw that and he ever tried it. He never tried it, but he's open to trying it. So I might be trying it
interesting.
in the near future. So I will record it and send it to you. Uh,
Yes, please.
but anyway, so the band, obviously, the more the band stretches, the more tension it has. So if somebody doesn't triple extend, or doesn't extend their hips or knees to full lockout when you're doing like a second pull position, the bands could help with that, because they will try to pull the bar down more. So now you have to exert more force. So when taking off the bands after that should help you extend better, and especially with the second pull, so you get better triple extension, better hip extension, and knee extension. Second of all, which I think it is better for, it's a better, actually better even benefit of adding bands, is actually getting under the bar faster. Because actually, when you have the bands attached, you triple extend, the bar gets to, like, I don't know, your sternum, and it starts dropping down. With the bands will pull the bar down faster than the bar itself would fall down. So actually, the bands increase gravity. So Louis Simmons always said the only thing that increases gravity speed is our bands. So the bar will start coming down faster. So now you have to get under the bar faster than normal. So for people that have problems of getting under the bar fast enough, that could be a helpful thing. And with working with Polish weightlifting now, they there's I see many athletes, like some of them don't have good triple extension, but they are very, very fast to get under the bar. And some of them have good triple extension, but because they're not getting under the bar that fast, and they have to triple extend, so they have to get the bar as high as they can so they can get under it. But there's this one guy that he's like 36 now. Uh, and he triple extends for a clean, and maybe the bar gets to his like belly button. That's as high as it gets, and he just gets under it so fast. Like he drops into full squat. It's like a split second. Like it's unbelievable. Like as long as he moves it like this much from triple extension, goes up this much, he gets under it. So if you get someone like that, then that's fine. I mean, bands probably don't need to be used. But if somebody has problems of triple extension, they have problems of getting under the bar, I think the bands could be potentially helpful.
Hey guys, it's me again. I just want to let you know that I also have Sweet Science of Fighting rash guards and shorts, so you can represent Sweet Science of Fighting on the mats and within competition. We have the classic, just like the shirt I'm wearing, rash guard, Sweet Science of Fighting on the front, and we have the logos on the sleeves, and then X Marshall on the back. We also have that in a shorts variation, same thing, with the Sweet Science of Fighting writing on one leg, and we have the logo on the other. But my personal favorite, this is my personal favorite by far. We have this in black and white, and it is the Taniwha Protector Guardian version of the Sweet Science of Fighting with the logo on the back. This was designed by a Māori designer back in New Zealand, so a bit of my heritage on this jersey. It represents the acknowledgement of battle and war. It also represents strength and stability, and also has the New Zealand silver fin. But even if you're not a Kiwi, cop this. This is an awesome design. It is a custom made design. You will not find it anywhere else. So check that. That'll also be down in the description with a discount code. But back to the podcast. Yeah, and I Polish weightlifting. I used to watch Kolecki. Is that how you say his name?
Yeah, Kolecki, yeah.
Kolecki.
Yeah.
I used to watch the shit out of those Poland training videos, man. That was like YouTube golden era for lifting. Like back in those days,
I think,
Polish training hall videos.
do you know Joel Smith from Just Fly Sports?
Yep.
Yeah, he just his last Instagram post, actually, he posted Polish weightlifting training from like the 70s. It's black and white. Yeah, go on his Instagram, is there. So it's funny. Because if you go on YouTube, you type in Polish weightlifting 1970 whatever, you have this black and white video that's like an hour long of just them doing a whole bunch of GPP stuff, like just running in the woods, squatting with with logs and things like that, doing splits, like doing different jumps and gymnastic things. So it's crazy. I mean, I think they were much more athletic back then than they are now, for sure.
Yeah, and it's funny because my wife was on the international weightlifting circuit and stuff like that. So we did a lot of traveling around with different places. And when she was training, doing her Olympic prep in Romania, when we were in Romania, there's as you mentioned, you took about a lot of that GPP. There was pretty much none that she would do. The off season would be literally just pulls and squats, multiple times a week, multiple times a day. You know, and it was like there wasn't much else. Then once you got into close to competition, then it's like more of the classical lifts, etc. But there wasn't much outside of that other than maybe doing some overhead presses and, walking with the bar or something like that. So the GPP stuff is interesting.
Yeah, there's so many different approaches now to weightlifting. Obviously, a lot of the methodology from weightlifting comes from the time where obviously drugs were allowed. So I'm not afraid to say
Bulgarian
that
method.
it's true. Yeah, so those guys could take a lot of more damage and they could train 5 times a day. Like with these athletes now and these weightlifters, like you can't do that. Like with them being clean now, they can barely we're actually thinking about some of them just training once a day. Like when we train, our split throughout the week is Monday you train twice, Wednesday you train twice, and Friday you train twice, and then Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday you train once. And for some of them, that's a lot, and that's the max that they could do. There is no way they could do more, and that's like 2-3 exercises maybe, with plus some like 1 or 2 accessory movements that I give them to do. So but we really have to be careful with them not to overtrain them. So we actually just designed for the past year, that's what we've been doing with the head coach, designed the whole new periodization model for them, which is more like undulating. So they have the specific periods when they have like deloads and lower intensities, because before it was just like linear and like first, and then it was like and then they start dropping because they couldn't keep up the intensity. So now it's better because they have the deload periods and they seem to be peaking at the right time. So we have the European Championships in 2 weeks, and they seem to be in the best shape of their life. So we'll see.
Nice. Hopefully we'll tune in. We typically watch most of the weightlifting events and things like that, so hopefully we can tune into that. But I want to come back to MMA conditioning before we finish off this podcast, and I know it's late for you. So obviously we mentioned around strength training. You have 2 sessions a week. Where does conditioning fit into this? How do you decide what you're going to do? We'll go from there.
Okay, so obviously with conditioning, it all depends what she does, like in her MMA. With the classic approach, what I do is obviously look at the energy system training. So when you have the energy systems, obviously you have the phosphagen system, the glycolytic, and the oxidative system. So if you can split those three systems into like a capacity and the strength of the system. So if you have the phosphagen strength, which would be up to maybe up to 10 seconds of work, and the capacity of that system is up to 20 seconds of work. So when designing conditioning programs for any athlete, pretty much, you want to actually start opposite of what everyone is doing. Everyone is always starting from long distance and then gradually getting shorter and shorter and shorter and increasing the intensity. But that's all you're doing. All you're doing is pretty much teaching an athlete how to be slow. With athletes, it's much better. It's much better to start with short distance, maximal intensity, and gradually increase the distance. So what I did with her, we started with short sprints, be like 5 seconds, 7 seconds, 8 seconds, and you want full recovery on that. So that would be a minimum 1-to-6 ratio. Even 6 would be like the minimum. But you can go up to 20, so 1-to-20 ratio. It depends on how she's recovering. So we start with short sprints and we gradually increase. So we'll actually do 2 weeks in one system, 2 weeks in another. So I'll do strength of phosphagen system, capacity of phosphagen system, strength of the glycolytic system, capacity of glycolytic system. So I would structure those with the dynamic method. So I would do 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, and 2 weeks, and starting 8 weeks away. And at the end, the last 2 weeks, I will see how she feels and what she needs, right? If she gets tired fast or if she can't go on for a long time, maybe I will, in that week, I will use a specific system that I feel that she would need the most or an athlete would need the most. But with her, we did 2 days of strength training and 2 days of additional energy system interval training on top of all her MMA training.
So how did the rest periods change then as you went through those blocks of 2 weeks? You mentioned 1-to-6 would be like the minimum work to rest
Yeah, so
initially. Did that change at all?
yeah, so it's the rest periods. You can do the nervous system recovery or the muscular recovery. So the nervous system recovery would be the longer ratio, which would be like a 1-to-20. If she's in great shape, she doesn't need that much, right? She would need more like a 1-to-6. 1-to-6 ratio would be like a muscular system recovery. So the way your muscles recover and your nervous system recovers is always different because your nervous system recovers at least 5 times slower than your muscular system. Okay. But if she's in good shape, we can kind of lower the ratio of the nervous system recovery. So the shorter the work time, the higher the ratio of work to rest. So if I have the phosphagen strength system, will be 1-to-6. Then moving on to like a capacity system of the phosphagen energy system will be 1-to-5 ratio. And then glycolytic will be 1-to-3. Then 1-to-2. Because obviously the longer the longer the work time, the shorter the shorter, the smaller the ratio, obviously. So if you run for 30 seconds, you don't need to now rest 5 minutes. You can rest like a minute and a half or 2 minutes and then try and repeat that again. But like I said, the ratio would drop and be based on how she's recovering. So what I did actually, we could actually measure, instead of the distance, I would give her the time, like let's say run for 5 seconds and see how much distance can she cover in 5 seconds. And I want her to repeat the same distance in each set. If she's dropping, then I could increase the ratio a little bit. If I'm at the top of that ratio and she's still dropping, then I'm finishing a workout pretty much, because it's turning into like an endurance training. So if she can keep the same distance in the same time at the correct ratio, I could do the required amount of reps. But I never had an exact amount of reps because it was based on how she's dropping. If she's dropped more than 10%, tells me that she's not recovering, and then it should be finished for the day.
Gotcha. And that would be quote unquote in camp conditioning. So when you're
Yeah.
out of camp and no fight coming up, how does that change or differ, or does it at all?
Yeah, out of camp, I do one of my favorite things, which is modified strongman training. And obviously I took that from Poliquin. I mean, Louis Simmons did some of that with the sled, but Poliquin has a book on that, and I fell in love with that a long time ago. So I do modified strongman training, and you can pretty much program that based on energy systems as well. So you can have 5 second work ratio, like 1 to 6 work ratio for the phosphagen system, and so on. So you can go through all the energy systems doing the strongman training. So I have the sleds, I have the yoke, I have the farmers handles, and I'll do different things with that. So out of camp, I like to do that because she's not sparring that much. When she gets to spar, then the contact is just too much to do the strongman training. So we would move on to interval running or air bike or like assault bike training, and we just leave the modified strongman training. So out of camp, I did once a week at least. I did strongman training, which I love. I do it same thing I do it with rugby. Out of season, off season, summer, we do strongman all day. Obviously, when they're in season, the contact is just too much for them to do that. So they have enough of that. So I don't do that. But it's my favorite conditioning actually tool. It would be modified strongman training for sure.
What would be an example circuit you would do then with the modified strongman?
So, for example, you have the hierarchy of picking the correct exercises in the correct order. So the first exercise should always be either the fastest or the heaviest exercise. So I don't know if you do like a tire flip on the beginning, or you do some kind of lift, like you do like a push press with with the fat grip dumbbells. So that would be the first. All right. So like let's say with her, I'll do like a dumbbell fat grip push press. All right, so you do have the required. Let's say you work for 10 seconds and try and get as many reps as you can in 10 seconds, right? And then you jump into a carry. So the next one would be like a carry. So you can carry yoke, you can carry farmers, you can do a farmer's walk, you can do a zercher carry. So one of those. So I love farmers walks. I love Zerker walks, and I love yoke walks. So one of those three is fine with me. So I usually do that, and then in the second, like a second station or like an A2 exercise, and I usually finish up. You either have to push a sled or pull it backwards or drag it backwards. So pushing would be easier, or pulling would be easier when you walk forward. When you drag it backwards, that would pretty much be the last exercise, because after you do that, the quads would just pretty much not comply with you anymore, and you pretty much just fall down. So I either push first and then I'll pull, or drag last. So dragging backwards would be like the last exercise I would do.
Awesome. Hopefully that's a lot of practical stuff for the listeners to go through as well. But I'm just going to be cognizant of your time there, Mirek. Obviously, it's late for you there. So where can people find you and follow you and keep up with what you're doing?
I'm pretty much all over social media, well, all over Facebook and Instagram. I'm not on TikTok. I'm not on Twitter or X. So I think Instagram would be the best way to see what I'm up to and what I'm doing. I think I'm under the most, and I'm trying to post regular stuff on that. So it's my first name, which is Mirek, Mirek _ and my last name is Babiarz. So Mirek _ Babiarz. You can message me on Instagram. I'm sure to respond. You can also email me. It's my first and last name, Mirek Babiarz, MIREK BABARZ11@gmail.com.
Perfect. I'll link those up in the description for the listeners who are listening to this, I guess the recorded version. But thanks for coming on, Mirek. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It was great.